Welcome to our podcast of Your Story Helps. Today, we have a very special episode because instead of one guest, we brought on three awesome guests to discuss and ponder some of the deep questions in life. And a lot of it, it's very, very meaningful and insightful to help us see the world, not just with our eyes, but with our heart. The first guest is an award winning poet, an author, and an educator. He gave me many eye opening experience to truly see the world. He is Horane Daley. Welcome, Horane.
Thank you, Isan, and thank you for even having me on this podcast. We really appreciate everything that you've done with everything that I've left you in the saloon on Sunir Swego and continuing to kind of building spaces to help people come together and talk. So thank you again for bringing us all here together.
Awesome. And our second and very best guest is an author of 3 books who gives life to compassion, to love, and to beauty. And what's more beautiful in life compared to love? He is Rickey, and also known as Apollo Love. Welcome, Rickey.
Thank you so much again, Isan. I'm really happy to be here, honored even, and I'm really excited to talk about our topic today. I'm really hoping that we leave more insightful, that everybody who listens leaves with, if not an answer, but a question that they should be thinking about.
And the third guest is the president of Judo Club in Oswego, and a friend who always has the capacity and vocabulary to help others to reflect and comprehend their own thoughts. He is Joshua Rampersad. Welcome, Josh.
Hello. Good to be here. Thank you, Easton, for inviting me. Thank you for taking the drive out here with me. Let's get to it. Let's discuss, find some more meaning.
Let's dive straight into it. Each of you are individuals in my life who are the most spiritual and most deeply connected to yourself, to the society, and to the world. This is a path which very few chooses, but each of you did. My question is, why do you choose this path for yourself, and how did it help you? Do you see the world differently? Did anything change? Why do you choose this path? Would you want to start, Horine?
I would actually like to ask more so what type of path? Are you saying the path that I want to build my purpose on, or the path of spirituality?
A little bit of both, right? You know, about why you are more connected to yourself. And also, you dive in deep about understanding your feelings, your emotion, and everything that surrounds you. Like how you are as a poet. You know, there's more to life, and you are showing that to me. So,
Yeah, I think that the best way I can explain that is through poetry, in that poetry is kind of it's that vulnerability. To be able to write, you have to be vulnerable. And to be able to be vulnerable, you have to be open to accepting the uncomfortable parts of yourself. And I think that because I've been writing poetry for so long and because I've been studying spirituality, those have intersected in a way that makes me very true to myself, because I know if I'm not true to myself, then I'm not being for myself. And then there's kind of it's a lack of purpose, you know? I think that you have to know where you came from, what you went through in order to figure out what you want to bring to the world. And I think poetry and spirituality has connected in a way to show me where I want to go, which is basically bringing people together and making them figure out their purpose, which, funny enough.
I love that you describe finding these answers can be uncomfortable, but yet it changed your perspective in life. Thank you. And how about you, Ricky?
I think that was actually a really amazing answer, for one, to a really solid question. Because when I think about it, I don't necessarily think about how, I chose this path, but more so how I manipulated its direction. Because at the end of the day, you don't really choose a path because you don't really choose what you go through. You choose how it affects you and what it makes you want to do with it. For example, I was born here and my path diverted. I could have been raised here my whole life, but instead I was raised in Ghana for about 4 years in like a critical time frame because I left here in let's say fourth grade, came back in eighth grade. I teach now, and meeting those kids in ninth grade, I'm realizing that what they went through the 2 years prior to coming to high school basically defined how they walked into high school. I spent those 2 years in a whole different country with a whole different set of customs and ideas about life. That kind of changed my path. And then after coming back here, experiencing that, I had to then decide what that was going to look like. Because my path essentially changed, but the direction stayed the same, which was kind of confusing. Because now I'm back here, and at the time, the whole point or the whole path was let's finish school. Finish school in Ghana, then come back here, try to finish school here. Two completely different school systems, customs, expectations. But what did I really want? My main focus, my main aim was to finish whatever that path was. Then from there, it's going to college, thinking that once I get to college, everything will just figure itself out. Junior Oswego wasn't the plan, if I'm being honest, but it ended up being the path. And I think in that being the case, it's like the path and the plan are not the same. But if your plan stays the same, then it doesn't really matter what path you're on. I don't really think I even knew where I wanted to go necessarily till after finishing the path at Oswego even, or meeting Horane, which I did maybe 3-4 years prior to that in Syracuse, which was another path that just kind of happened out of nowhere because we didn't even end up going to Syracuse and we thought we were going to. So I think at a point, it became less about why I was still on this path and more about what I wanted this path to mean for my purpose. Because now I know that my purpose is helping people. In some way, shape, or form, I want to assist somebody. I don't know if this path was made for me to do that. Because technically, you can make your path whatever you want it to make, right? And even if I didn't like this path, I could just make another one. But I just feel like this path is the best thing for my purpose, the best thing for my plan. And if anything, I think when your path and your purpose align, it means that you're doing the right thing. Ironically enough, me and Horane were talking to our mentor right before speaking to you guys, and he had literally just said, what does the intentionality matter, right? If what you're doing is God's plan. And I think in that context, it's like, if everything that I'm doing here is for something bigger than myself, then this path, this plan, this purpose is all bigger than me. Which means whatever I'm doing right now, whether I get it or not, whether the path was my path or just the path I happen to be on or not, I'm using it to do what I should be doing. So I guess I can just trust the direction, you know?
I love how you say you have a purpose and a path. You can control your purpose, but the path just happens. But as long as you stay true to your purpose, you can make that path and purpose both align together. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Ricky. How about you, Josh?
For me, what I think about is the reason why I chose this path is because there is no other option. Because whether or not I choose the path or not, the path already chose me. And I think that nobody chooses to live, but you have to choose to be alive.
Wow. There's no better way to say that. So, today I also want to dive into this topic. There are almost 8 billion people in the whole world. 8 billion. As for our civilization, we are about 6,000 years old. Our ancestry has been around here for about 6 million years. So we as individuals are a blip in the human history. Even a smaller blip on the earth. And we are the most tiny blip in the universe. So with that, right, many of us have often asked, in the course of history too, what are we here for? What are we doing here? What is our purpose? We ask this question sometimes in a sad way, in a curious way, and sometimes in an aggressive way. Maybe our existence itself is weird. Religion has an explanation. Modern science has an explanation. Philosophy has another explanation. So my question is, why are we here? Why are we as individuals are here for?
Great question. I think I can take it back to what Josh was saying, in that we don't choose to come here and everything like that. So with that in mind, that means somebody else chooses for us, something else, and I think that something else is what people choose to believe in as their God, as their savior, and everything. And so I think what our purpose is very, very tied to what our God is and what the purpose of a religion is at the same time. Because I think that, just like what you said, 6 billion years ago, right? We've continued to develop, which means that we'll continue to develop, right? And most religions, they were rewritten. Some religions, they weren't rewritten, right? So they were set in a certain period. And then we kind of carry on the same ideals. And me and Ricky was talking about this morning and everything. And he said that we carry on the same ideals, but we have to also match up the ideals of the religion with the ideals of our current society, right? And so my idea is that this is why I believe in unity so much. We're all here together to continue to explore ourselves, because we also don't know where we came from. We don't know where our mind came from. We don't know where most of our thoughts come from, right? So to me, I'm an explorer. I'm here to make sure I'm exploring all those facets of my brain, facets of my personality. And I think that, in a sense, and because I know I have a piece of God within me, that in a sense can connect to God, the universe. And we're we're helping the universe develop. We're helping the masses develop consciousness, and that all doesn't just start from nothing. That all starts from one person doing his work, another person doing his work, another person doing his work, and then one other person doing his work, and connecting all of that. And then that moves the society forward. That moves what our thought processes forward, and that also moves our isms forward as well.
Um, you know, and again, another very depthful answer. I think this question always stumps me because I'm always wondering. So many shows back in middle school kind of tried to answer this. Avatar, I tried to answer it a couple of times. Honestly, even shows that weren't focused on things like this, like Gumball, would probably have taken a crack at this answer. They did it for love as well. But I think I'm realizing now, an answer begs a question, right? Because at the end of the day, a question's focus is to receive some form of answer to it. When you ask what our reason is for being here, it takes away the fact that technically we don't have to be here with a reason. There are people who just exist, who have never once thought, why am I even existing? Like, in the sense of even what Josh said, right? You don't choose to live because you don't, but you choose to be alive, right? So when you ask the meaning of life, are you asking it in the sense of like the meaning of survival or the meaning of finding your purpose and then doing something with it? Because if you just ask me to survive, then I'm just gonna go get a 9 to 5 purposely. Like there is no purpose besides me trying to survive. I'm just doing all of this to make it to the end, which is weirdly enough death, right? Or am I trying to find meaning within my life, whether that's the reason I'm alive or not, till I die? You know what I'm saying? Because there are people who have worked 30, 40 years, and when those people retire, it's like a congratulatory party. Were they alive that whole time? Or did they survive that whole time? Did they ever ask themselves, after they woke up at 8 in the morning, got to their job for 9, and left at 5, what am I doing here? Nah, they didn't. They just did it over and over and over again. Then 1 year passed, and 2 years passed. I just made a year in this career, quote unquote. Was I alive that whole time? I would like to believe so because I feel something when I do it. But if you asked me a couple years back, would be what I'd be doing when it came to like being alive? I wouldn't have said yes. I would have said I was trying to survive. So I think right now, I love the question because it makes me wonder, what is a person's purpose, right? How do they even determine that? Is it based off the path question that you said? Is it based off trying to determine a purpose and then find a path that aligns to that? Is it based on already being on a path and somehow through that path finding your purpose and staying on it? Or is it you just realizing that if you're gonna be here, you're gonna first of all be set up to survive instinctively because that's just what it is to be alive. You're just trying to like live, right? The whole purpose of it is to survive. Babies cry when they're hungry because the idea is I want to be fed or I'll die. But when it comes to like gaining consciousness and then making a purpose out of something, whole different conversation. I think the question is insightful because it makes you really wonder, like, after all this intelligence that we've developed, do we even know what we're really doing? And honestly, when I look at governments and I look at the state of the world, I could say no when it comes to leaders, right? I feel like there are a lot of people who are probably qualified to leading countries, leading societies, who have an answer or somewhat to this question, who aren't doing that. But on a basic level of human instinct, I feel like the question has lost its merit because it doesn't change the reality of what it means to be alive. Whether you were to find a purpose in 40 years and pass away, find a purpose in 60 years or pass away, I think the main thing for me isn't finding a meaning to life, but more like making your existence mean something to you. You know what I'm saying? Because when it comes down to it, people make things, right? And funny enough, I think we were talking about the idea of longevity of a person. When you make something, you're creating a sense of almost like a signature on the planet. Because when you pass, that thing continues to exist through memory, right? But your existence isn't validated by somebody else's memory of you. If you guys never met me, does that change the fact that I was here? It just changes the ability of you guys to validate that, you know? But if my purpose was to be remembered, then I'd want to meet as many people as possible so that they all remember me and I can stay quote unquote alive after I pass. But if I was to just stay in a cave, figure out the world's biggest questions in that cave, and somebody finds those answers later, did it validate whether or not I was here while I was doing it alive? Just because they find it after I passed away? When you realize that the answer to that is no, then you realize that the answer to that question also kind of doesn't matter. And I think at this point, we don't want to spend too much time focusing on things that don't matter because the clock is ticking regardless, right? And whether or not you believe in time doesn't change when it strikes something.
You said a lot of really great things. One thing I picked up relates to like a movie I once watched. And essentially the girl asked the guy like, "Oh, like why do people get married?" And the guy said, "Oh, you get married for love." And then the girl was like, "No, you get married to have a witness to your life." You know, going back to like the intelligence thing, I definitely feel like evolution isn't really linear. You know, like humans today aren't the best humans that have existed. We're just the best humans that exist for the environment that we're currently in. And I think intelligence works the same way, you know? Are we the most intelligent versions of humans that exist? Who's to say yes, who's to say no? But we may be the best that currently exists for our modern world. And once the modern world changes, that's also going to change. And going back to like another thing you said, talking about like survival and like thriving, but then there are people who exist whose survival is to thrive. You know, like some people's standard for surviving is a lot higher and having a lot more than that. Some people cannot exist without that, so their survival is dependent on that thriving. And I remember like me and Horane, we were talking about it, having that certain like life energy, that zest to you, and like how to express that like as an artist and how to like go through that. You know, so it's all that is coming up right now.
What I get from like kind of both of what you guys said is that although you can say there's no meaning, I think that depending on it, there's no meaning because you give life its meaning. So you come up with that answer, not through like, sometimes studying yourself, but really just through exploring the world and just like being in the world and thinking, now that I'm here, what can I do? It's not even what was I made for, what can I do? What skills was I given from birth? What skills have I developed from experiences? And what purpose have what life energy have I also developed through those experiences? And where does that life energy want to go? Because everybody's life energy wants to go in different places. Sometimes it's a bad place and sometimes it's a good place. But at the end of the day, you're creating that path for where that life energy flows into.
Going back to like I guess what you said. So one thing I think is pretty interesting is that the way that we process the world, including our like traumas from our parents, right? Because the traumas they have, they give to us as well. You know, so there's something to say about this life energy that just passes through us, right? And it's our responsibility to recognize that and to do something with it, right? If we don't, it just continues and we continue to hurt people in the way that we've been hurt. up to us to recognize it and to change it. Like there's like going back to like an example probably talked about before, where it's like there's two brothers and like the dad is an alcoholic. And then one brother could be like, "Oh, I drink because I saw my dad do it," and the other brother could be like, "I don't drink because I saw my dad do it." Breaking that trauma, that generational curse, and taking that energy that's been given to us without our consent and doing something with it.
Yeah, it's very interesting, how we all put in like different perspective because of our experience in life that happened to us, right? Like how we talk about our belief is kind of constructed with history, religion, God, and that might be true for a lot of people, but also might not be true to a lot of people. Like how we say, making your existence mean something to you, and whatever that is, it could be different. It could totally be different. Like how Josh mentioned too. Some people put the survival to strive, and that's how they feel alive. But it doesn't mean that another person needs to strive to be alive. It could be just living in a cave. That's alive too. That's as much alive as someone striving to be alive, right? And it's just in their own perspective. So I love that.
I wanted to connect it to your question because now I'm wondering, like, I've never heard the question flipped, right? So you ask a person, what is the meaning to your life? Let's not even say what is the meaning of life. What is the meaning of yours or to yours, right? And if that person doesn't have an answer for you, does that mean that they're not worthy of the ability to live, right? Because to me, to ask this question is to basically say the only way to validate something is to make meaning of it. But I think that only applies to mathematical concepts. Life is not a mathematical concept. It's an abstract reality. So if I'm trying to apply that type of logic to it, that means if I cannot come up with an answer, there is no point in living. Like let's say what age do we gain consciousness? Is it like 4 or 5 or something?
I believe it's 5.
Okay, so let's say now that we've hit 8 billion and we've hit our quota, every time a person turns 5, we sit them in a room and psycho-evaluate them. And we ask them, what is the meaning to your life? And if they can't answer, you put them down. Just like that. Because now that they can't make meaning of something that they don't even understand, we deem them unqualified to even try to explore it. To ask this question is to say that there's a qualification to exploring this. Animals are out here just living. And they just live and they kill and they die and they get eaten and the cycle continues because all it really is a transfer of energy. But we've added context to that. And in adding context to that, we've allowed it to only make sense within certain boxes, within certain lenses, within certain pretenses. Every time we want to understand something, we create another box. How many more boxes do we need before we realize that honestly, the biggest issue here is how many boxes we have? If we were to take this back, as you said, and really think about the idea of us being the most qualified human version to live here, the answer 100% is no. Because get rid of all these buildings. Neanderthals are lasting out here. We're not taking a day. We're not lasting a day out here. Neanderthals are, though. The original Homo sapiens are, but we're not. Because on a scientific approach to it, they were the most equipped for Earth before we changed Earth to make ourselves the most equipped. This is not what Earth is technically supposed to be. There is a reality somewhere out there, I believe, where there's just tree houses, bare forest land, right? Very, very, very healthy soil, a beautiful connection to water and water bodies at that, and land that's not been interrupted by concrete and the creation of things of that nature, right? But when it comes down to it, I believe, honestly, evolution is the weirdest in humans because I don't necessarily feel like we physically evolved. I think we devolved our reality, and so now we seem like the most evolved. But if all of this went away and all of the structures we built became abstract and obsolete, we would realize that we haven't really come that far. Money is probably the silliest thing we've created in the last how many years our civilization has existed. The idea that we went from bartering to money is probably the most asinine thing of our civilization to me. Because you're basically telling me, right? And I don't even carry physical money, by the way. There is a man who is dead on a green piece of paper made from a tree that's also green, by the way. And if I don't have a couple of these, I am unfit to live to begin with. Wouldn't that mean that the meaning of life is money? That if I can afford $2,000 rent in the city that I was born in without my consent, by the way, I should die? by being homeless outside. And when the winter comes and it gets more gruesome than it already is, I just die out there because I don't have an amount of dead face people in my pocket. Is that not the meaning to life? To live, right? And if to live means to have money, that means the meaning of my life is to have money. But I don't think that because that sounds more like survival. And I don't think that that's the meaning of life, right? I feel like that's a bare minimum. And there's no meaning in a bare minimum. It's just a lower threshold.
One thing you said that stuck out to me made me think about how I think in today's world we're very good at masking heinous, right? And what I mean by that is like you think about like, oh, like before these buildings, before the like infrastructure, these rules, society, like life could have been like a lot more aggressive, a lot of like fend for yourself, a lot of like I guess quote unquote evil, etc. But masking the heinous, I think when you said that, oh, like when you gain consciousness and you try to determine whether or not like that person is fit to live or not, and then if they're not, you put them down. We still do that, and the reason I say that is because at age 5 is when they start giving you IQ tests, and you fail that, they're gonna put you down into different schooling, treat you a little differently, right? So they're still killing that person, but maybe not physically, mentally. There's definitely people who like don't fall within that IQ scale, but then can function fine and with still like proper learning, maybe a little more attention can like get that. But then there's also the other side where like you give them this label, you give them this like perception, and that changes them.
What you were talking about kind of reminded me of the idea that of soul, right? And I've kind of been trying to define soul because I think that once you tell someone that their IQ is lower than the rest of everyone else, they start to get self-conscious, right? And once you start to get the most self-conscious, I think you start to lose your soul because you start to lose the meaning in your life. Because, if you can have one meaning in one thing and somebody else is telling you that's not really meaningful, then you lose that meaning. You lose your push for life, you lose your motivation. So now I'm starting to think, is that soul the meaning? Is that soul the life energy? It's a combination of different energies from our ancestors, from what we've done on this earth, and probably what we're going to do later on. That's all coming together to create one energy field in a person's body.
It's so interesting, actually. Now that you spin it back to that, and I'm actually really happy that you even mentioned that, right? If you even put it in that lens now, matter of fact, let's use that lens. So the meaning of life is soul. Let's talk about the system that we've allowed to determine our lives. Does that system cultivate soul? No. Does it nurture soul? No. Does it focus on soul? No. These kids, whether they hit that IQ or not, enter a school that looks like a jail. They learn about things that they don't care about, and they do not get to cultivate anything that actually matters to them. Whether they're gifted in the arts, in cultivating our literal planet, in expressing their beliefs and feelings through poetry or written material or art again, they're told that they have to learn about things that have no correlation to their literal lived experiences, cultures, or anything of that matter. And they do that for 12 years straight. We don't even give them meaning within those 12 years, by the way. We just give them context to another system that they also were not alive for, that was also obsolete because it wasn't correct. And we just keep funneling them in and out. In and out, in and out. I don't know if you guys ever seen that picture that I think went viral on Twitter of you just see like a rainbow entering a machine that says school and then it just comes out black and white. That is exactly what we've done. The funniest part about this question is that it took us 14 years of schooling to then come out and realize that everything that we've learned since being told what learning something meant basically made us have to unlearn all of it in another 4 years and then start living. College, if you went, and if you used it properly, was you unlearning everything you learned from the 12 years prior to that. Then that just honestly means that let's say you finish college at 21, and at a point our average lifespan is like 50, maybe 65. You only get about, let's just say 20 years, if you're starting from the beginning, which most regular people realize they are, to unlearn all of that and then relearn a whole new consciousness. Because at that point, it's like you're looking in the mirror and realizing everything that you learned did not reflect anything you felt. And I believe you truly start learning when your feelings and your thoughts coincide. If I care about what I'm learning, it sticks with me. They literally tell you that teachers who cannot touch your spirit will never touch your mind. Because while mind and spirit are obviously not the same, they have to be aligned to learn anything. You have to align yourself with your path and your purpose to even make meaning. So even when I pose the question of what does meaning matter, if we're going to use it as a determinant of whether or not you should live, it's also saying what does meaning matter if you're going to live and not do anything with what you feel you're meant to do. There are artists out here who are throwing garbage away from 9 to 5. There are people who would be out here painting, writing, singing, who are running train stations because the system did not give them the opportunity to even determine, much less express, the meaning that they might have found in their own existence. So at this point, my real question isn't even what the meaning of life is, it's what the meaning of this system is to what I should be doing with my life. Because at the end of the day, we're all talking about this and we're stuck in the system anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like we all chasing degrees, chasing masters. Whole time, look at what we're talking about. What about what we're doing with our actual lives right now reflects what we're talking about? If anything, this conversation might as well just be called cognitive dissonance 101. Because I'm over here talking about this, actually believing this, and guess where I'm going in 2 months? Right back to school. Doesn't even make sense.
Speaking about art, what I'm thinking about is I wonder if art really is the expression of strive. Like you have to feel artistically inspired to get something you don't have. Like for example, like not a painter, not a singer, but I guess my art may be like combat sports, right? Or working out, right? For that, I'm striving for something I feel like I don't have. You know, having that strength, having that confidence. But I wonder like where that plays into the role of like cultivating this creative energy. What's to be strived for? Because there's a lot to be strived for in society, I think.
I think I want to go back to that idea of that. Are we the best humans living in the world right now for the way the world is? And I think back to like maybe the 1800s, 1700s, where it's that I seen that those societies had more expression to them. You know, right? You see the cathedrals, you see the ceilings. And actually, I was reading a book, and they say that ceiling is connected to heaven, and that's where the Latins got it from and everything. And you realize back in the day, they used to have all those drawings on the ceilings, all those paintings. It looked majestic. And then nowadays, you look at the ceiling, you see a white wall, just a white ceiling. So now I'm wondering, right? Back then, we were creative beings. We're still creative beings. But the society we live in today, as we were just talking about, it restricts creativity. It restricts expression. So maybe our minds are best fit to live in the adapted world, but are our souls best fit to live in this adapted world?
That is crazy amount of pointers that we talk about. And I love it. I love it. You know, I want to go back to the point where we talk about professions and the system that we are in. You know, in every system that we are in, it's kind of like a prison, like a jail, like how Rickey was describing. And with that too, we reward professions that we think are supposed to be the better ones. Like example, lawyers, right? Lawyers are in the top of the hierarchy. But why is that? Because we say so. There's no other reason than that. And why artists are living like a dirt is because we say so. And a lot of artists, of course, we have seen artists that, you know, really boom and had a successful career. Like who knows, like Pitbull or whoever, right? But it's not everyone that is lucky enough to be that. Because of the society that restrict the artists to really not be able to express themselves. Like how you say, in the older times, they reward artists. That is why everywhere you go, even the ceiling, even the wall, the window, everything that you see, it's very artistic. It's very expressed feelings. So I love that. Maybe being truly alive is being able to express yourself.
Going back to the idea that older societies would prize this art more. while I could see that point definitely, another point that I see as well is like there's the role of perception into that as well. Like say for example, one of the civilizations that gets pride for their technological advancements are the Egyptians, right? But a lot of the time when we're looking at stuff from like Egyptian society, we're looking at it through a Greek lens. Like say for example, the word hieroglyph is actually a Greek word for symbolic writing. So how can we call their language something that's not even their own language? You know, so there's this role of perception of what this meant. Oh, like these people were this way and that way and this way, but then who's saying that? And if they are saying that, why do I believe it? You know, there's definitely layers to what this means.
And actually, you touch on a good point too. Every explanation that we give, it's like how Ricky said, putting a block in them. And that kind of define the action that comes after. And we kind of put a lot of explanation to many things that we don't actually know if it needs a meaning. Like we mentioned too, does life itself need a meaning? We are trying to put a one word meaning to it, right? Or one sentence meaning to it. But it is not like that. There's a many perspective, there's many parts of it, and what we pay attention to is what we give meaning to. And that's what our life could be. And so with that, right, I want to share this quote and kind of want to hear what we think about this. It says, "We are not humans experiencing the universe. We are the universe experiencing humans."
I like this quote because, in a sense, I think it goes back to what I was saying before, that we're the universe experiencing humanity. Therefore, we are humanity developing the consciousness of the universe because the universe is watching us, right? So that's how it's experiencing all the things that we're experiencing. And if we're experiencing consciousness, if we're experiencing reflection, we're experiencing meaning and soul, then the universe is also experiencing those things through us as well.
I'm just gonna tie it back really quickly to the idea of reflection. If you look at a pond at night, you see the sky. And at that point, you're seeing the stars and the moon, right? The idea of looking into a mirror, to me, whatever's reflected back is whatever you're feeling, right? Because when it comes down to it, mirrors are only half the reflection. The other half are what you feel when you look in them. When I look up, I can imagine the universe as it was described by religious books, religious texts, theological texts. Or I can realize that when it comes down to it, I'm the one technically getting looked at, right? When I look up there. So in that context, it really just comes down to the universe is within the limitations of our own scope. We are living on a planet now that has given us definitions for almost everything. The more important thing is the idea that all of those things are directly defined by your own understanding. There will always be a limit on something because once you try to create a level of understanding for it, levels have a ceiling. If you were to define everything without ceilings, you would realize that there is a freedom and a lack of understanding. Technically, ignorant people are the most free people because at that point, you don't care to understand. There's a difference between being ignorant and being uninformed or misinformed. With one of those things, you can do work to bridge that gap. When you're ignorant, you don't care for information anymore. And there's a freedom to not caring. Because to me, to be free, honestly, is to just exist without care or definition. Because without care and definition, there is no limitation. And what is freedom except no limitation?
One thing that quote makes me think of is honestly the ability to give people grace. You know, and I guess the way that it makes sense to me in my head is a friend recently told me this. This is everybody's first attempt at life. You know, why judge yourself? Why judge those other people? And this doesn't mean like give everybody access to you, because there are definitely people that you shouldn't give access to your life. But to hold that grudge against them is to judge them on their first attempt at life.
Yeah, and I guess my interpretation, I don't even know if it's correct, but I see it as you are the universe expressing itself as a human for a little while. Yeah. So, I want to conclude this topic by saying that I like how we talk about all this. And perhaps the question of what is the meaning of life is not the right question. And that is why this question is the hardest question, right? Because the question itself is wrong. And perhaps we should ask ourselves a better question. What is the meaning of life to you? What do you want to give life to? So thank you, all three of you, for sharing your insights and your story around it. And with that, I want to ask each of you the last question to close off this wonderful chapter. What is the best advice that you have ever heard that you want to share to us and to the audience?
For this, I think about don't be so perfect of a human that you forget to be human.
Wow. I didn't actually expect that to be so profound for one sentence. Damn, that was beautifully said. Um, I think mine will just be two words, which is be authentic. And I think the only reason I'm even gonna go with that is because, especially in our time now, nobody wants to be. But I've realized, especially in finally finding a way to stay true to who I am and who I was, that everything around me now feels harmonious. And I think things can't be harmonious if they're not real.
I think I'm gonna go to a quote, which is define and empower, not divide and conquer. I think that as a society we're used to dividing and conquering, even within ourselves, within our friend groups. And I think that the way to give meaning to life, is to empower other people, to give life to other people, and that comes with first defining your experiences, and then empowering the next person experiences as well.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this chapter. So, thank you, everyone, and your story helps.